Today marks a historic step in China-Burkina Faso relations. Under the leadership of President Ibrahim Traore, we have secured $3.5 billion in infrastructure investments to transform transport, energy, and digital connectivity. This partnership is not charity, it is a strategic investment in Africa's future, creating jobs, boosting trade, and proving that when China and Africa walk together, miracles are possible.
Imagine a country long written off by the world, landlocked, scarred by poverty, and fighting just to stay afloat. Now imagine that same country suddenly holding a golden ticket, $3.5 billion in Chinese-backed infrastructure projects, roads where there were none, power plants to light up entire regions, railways binding the Sahel. Together, this isn't a fantasy. This is happening right now in Burkina Faso under the leadership of Captain Ibrahim. But here's the question. Is this the birth of Africa's next economic miracle, or the start of a dangerous dependency on Beijing? The answer takes us into a story of ambition, risk, and a fight for survival, one that stretches far beyond Burkina Faso and into the very heart of Africa's future. And to understand why this deal could change everything, we have to rewind and look at how one of the world's poorest nations suddenly became the focus of China's billion-dollar investment machine. When Captain Ibrahim seized power in Burkina Faso in 2022, the world barely noticed a young officer, just 34 years old, standing in military fatigues, promising his people dignity and sovereignty. Too many outsiders, he was just another name in the long list of African leaders rising through coups. But citizens quickly became something more. He represented defiance, a rejection of years of economic stagnation, insecurity, and reliance on Western aid that never seemed to solve anything, and unlike many who came before him, had a vision that looked east, not west. He spoke openly about building stronger ties with countries that offered respect and tangible results. Enter China. Now, the fact that Beijing was even interested in Burkina Faso is surprising. This is a small country, no ocean access, fragile economy, but saw an opportunity. Burkina Faso needed infrastructure, and China needed allies in the Sahel. That combination would spark a deal that some are already calling the single most transformative investment in the nation's history. But before we get to the $3.5 billion deal itself, we need to understand why China is even putting this much money into a country most global investors ignore. For decades, Africa has been the stage where superpowers test their global strategies. The US focuses on military aid. Europe pushes humanitarian programs. But China builds, from Kenya's standard gauge railway to Ethiopia's industrial parks. Beijing has poured hundreds of billions into African infrastructure under its massive Belt and Road Initiative. So why Burkina Faso? The answer lies in geography. The Sahel isn't just a strip of land, it's the bridge between West Africa's coast and the Sahara Desert. Control trade here, and you control routes linking the Atlantic to North Africa. And while Western powers see the Sahel as a security headache, China sees it as a logistics and energy opportunity. By investing in Burkina Faso, Beijing gains three things: strategic foothold in West Africa. Neighboring countries like Mali and Niger are also pivoting toward non-Western partners. Access to untapped resources. The region has gold, manganese, and rare earth minerals. Soft power influence. While France's presence wanes, China steps in as the new development partner. 4. This wasn't charity, it was leverage. He knew China wanted influence, so he offered access in exchange for something Burkina Faso has been starving for: hard infrastructure. But the sheer scale of this deal stunned everyone. $3.5 billion worth of projects in a country whose entire GDP hovers around $20 billion. That's nearly 1/6 of the nation's economy in a single package. So what exactly does this money buy? The agreement between Burkina Faso and China covers a massive range of projects, but for areas stand out as the backbone of the deal. Roads and highways. Thousands of kilometers of new roadways will finally link rural areas with cities. For a country where farmers often can't reach markets, this could be transformative. Energy projects. Burkina Faso faces chronic electricity shortages, with less than 25% of rural populations having reliable power. The deal includes new solar farms, hydroelectric plants, and grid expansions. Railway development, perhaps the boldest project, a new railway connecting Ouagadougou to coastal ports via neighboring countries. For a landlocked nation, this is nothing short of revolutionary. Urban infrastructure, modern housing, water treatment facilities, and digital connectivity upgrades projects designed to elevate living standards and attract further investment. Think about it. These aren't just projects. They're building blocks of an economy. Roads mean trade, power plants mean factories, railways mean exports. And for the average citizen, it means jobs, thousands of them. But here's the catch. These projects aren't free. Most are financed through Chinese loans, construction handled by Chinese companies. Which raises the question, is Burkina Faso building prosperity or digging itself into a debt trap? That's where the debate heats up, and to understand the stakes, we need to look at how other African nations have fared under similar deals. China's footprint in Africa is massive, and the results are mixed. Take Ethiopia. Its Chinese-built railways and industrial parks helped spark one of the fastest-growing economies in the world during the 2010s. Millions were lifted out of poverty, but then look at Zambia. When it struggled to repay Chinese loans, it faced a debt crisis that forced the government into tough renegotiations. Kenya? Its standard gauge railway connecting Nairobi to Mombasa is a marvel of engineering, but the debt burden has been so heavy that critics question whether the project will ever pay for itself. So which path will Burkina Faso follow? Supporters argue that because is negotiating at a time when the West's influence is declining, he has unusual leverage. China wants allies in the Sahel badly enough that the terms might actually favor Burkina Faso more than usual. Critics, however, worry that the country's fragile economy simply can't absorb loans of this scale. They fear that one missed payment could give China leverage over critical assets like mines or railways. It's a high-stakes gamble, and it's one seems willing to take, but what's driving his urgency? Why is he pushing so aggressively for such massive projects right now? To understand S urgency, you have to look at the daily reality of Burkina Faso. This is a nation where over 40% of people live below the poverty line, where access to healthcare is limited, schools are underfunded, and farmers struggle just to move crops from village to market. On top of that, Burkina Faso has been grappling with instability in its northern regions. Infrastructure isn't just about growth, it's about survival. Roads and railways allow for quicker troop movement, power plants keep critical services running. Development in E's eyes is also security. He knows the window is small. If his government doesn't deliver tangible improvements quickly, public support could evaporate. So the $3.5 billion deal isn't just an economic play, it's a political lifeline. But here's the twist. While this looks like a purely bilateral deal, the ripple effects extend far beyond Burkina Faso's borders. Because if this gamble works, it could reshape the balance of power across the entire Sahel. Let's zoom out. Burkina Faso isn't alone in pivoting away from Western partners. Mali, Niger, and even Chad are all rethinking their international alliances. The Sahel is in flux. If successfully leverages Chinese investment to spark real growth, he could set a precedent for the entire region, proof that turning eastward can deliver results. And think about the numbers. $3.5 billion in infrastructure doesn't just benefit Burkina Faso. Roads cross borders, railways link trade corridors, power grids can be regional. It's the domino effect. One success story could inspire neighboring nations to follow, and in a region long dismissed as unstable and unprofitable, that could ignite an economic boom that nobody saw coming. But of course, the risks are just as big. If the projects stall, if debt overwhelms the economy, if public trust collapses, then the miracle becomes a cautionary tale, which means that for the next decade is make or break. So here we are, Burkina Faso, a small landlocked country, suddenly holding one of the biggest infrastructure packages in its history. $3.5 billion in Chinese investment. To some, it's a lifeline, a chance to leapfrog decades of underdevelopment. To others, it is a trap, a shiny new chain that, 'tis Burkina Faso's future to Beijing's ambitions. The truth is, nobody knows how this will play out. But one thing is certain, the decisions being made right now in Ouagadougou could echo across Africa for generations. And as we watch Ibrahim gamble his nation's future on this grand vision, we're left with a single, haunting question. Will Burkina Faso become Africa's next economic miracle or its next debt cautionary tale?